You're throwing away your career for some internet pipe dream. That MBA was a waste of money after all. My brother-in-law's words cut through the awkward silence at our family Thanksgiving dinner. But before I jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Every head turned toward me as my sister placed a sympathetic hand on my arm. Uncle Frank chuckled from across the table. "Well, you could always come back to the firm when it fails." I can still remember the burn of embarrassment crawling up my neck as I nodded and forced a smile. "We'll see." That was 7 years ago. Today I'm 40 years old and financially independent, with a thriving e-commerce empire that generated $4.2 million in revenue last year. The family dinners are quieter. Now, when the topic of my work comes up, funny how success has a way of silencing the skeptics. My name is Nathan Reed, 40 years old, and until 7 years ago, I was grinding out 70-hour weeks at Meridian Consulting in Chicago, a prestigious firm where my uncle was a senior partner. The golden handcuffs were firmly in place, 6-figure. Salary, performance bonuses, the corner office with a view of Lake Michigan. On paper, I was living the dream that my middle-class parents had sacrificed to make possible. The first cracks appeared during a routine client meeting. I was presenting growth projections for a manufacturing client when my mind simply disconnected. My mouth kept moving, pointing at slides and reciting numbers I'd memorized. But inside, a voice was screaming, "Is this really all there is? Another 30 years of PowerPoints and performance reviews." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my sleek downtown apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture I rarely had time to enjoy, scrolling through e-commerce websites, dropshipping, FBA, print on demand, terms I'd been researching in secret for months. I'd been building a business plan, testing product ideas, studying successful online entrepreneurs. Not the get-rich-quick schemes, but the legitimate business. Models that leverage digital infrastructure to create sustainable income with lower overhead than traditional retail. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would give myself 18 months to build something that could replace my income, or I'd crawl back to corporate America with my tail between my legs. I started small, working nights and weekends. My first store specialized in eco-friendly kitchen products, bamboo utensils, beeswax wraps, reusable produce bags. Products I believed in, with healthy margins and a growing market. I emptied my savings to secure inventory, built the website myself, learned digital marketing through trial and error and countless YouTube tutorials. 3 months in, my uncle called. "Nathan, you missed the Harrington pitch meeting. Frank says you've been distracted lately. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath and told him the truth. I was transitioning out, building my own business. There was a long pause on the line. "Your father worked 2 jobs to put you through Wharton," he finally said. "This isn't what he sacrificed for." The official announcement at Thanksgiving was just the public execution of what had already been decided in private family chat groups and concerned phone calls. My parents tried to hide their disappointment with forced smiles. "As long as you're happy, honey," my mum said, but her eyes told a different story. My father simply asked about health insurance. I cleared out my office the following Monday. Diane from HR gave me a sympathetic smile as I handed in my key card. "Brave move," she whispered. "Most people just dream about it." I nodded, but my confidence was paper-thin. The weight of my family's expectations and my own self-doubt followed me home like a shadow. The first 6 months were brutal. My inventory choices weren't perfect. Marketing costs ate into my margins. I made rookie mistakes with suppliers. Every family gathering became an interrogation. "How's the internet thing going?" they'd ask, skepticism barely concealed beneath polite smiles. "Building momentum," I'd reply, the same answer every time. What I didn't tell them was that I was living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, that I'd moved from my downtown apartment to a tiny studio in a less desirable neighborhood, that I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. On a particularly rough day, 0 sales, a supplier issue, and a strongly worded email from my landlord about the late rent, my phone lit up with a text from Uncle Frank. Position opening up in the new year. Say the word, and it's yours. No. Shame in admitting when you're out of your depth. I stared at that message for an hour, my finger hovering over the reply button. Then I closed the phone, opened my laptop, and worked until sunrise. Not out of stubbornness, but because deep down beneath the fear and doubt I still believed. I wasn't just escaping the corporate world. I was building something that aligned with my values, something that could grow beyond what any salary could offer. The turning point came unexpectedly. A popular, sustainable living influencer featured one of my bamboo travel utensil sets in an Instagram post. The post went viral, and suddenly, my little store was flooded with orders. I scrambled to keep up, packaging products on my living room floor, making daily trips to the post office with boxes stacked in my arms. That month, I cleared $12,000 in profit, more than I needed to cover expenses, proof of concept, but it wasn't just the money. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was the customer emails. Love my new plastic-free kitchen. Finally found sustainable products that actually work. I was creating value, not just shuffling paperwork between corporate entities. For the first time in my professional life, I felt genuinely proud of what I was building. I expanded my product line, reinvesting nearly every dollar of profit, built relationships with new suppliers, hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service. Every step was calculated, methodical. This wasn't a hobby or a side hustle anymore. This was the foundation of something substantial. At Christmas that year, my sister cornered me by the punch bowl. "You look different," she said. "Happier. Are things really going okay with the business?" I showed her my sales dashboard on my phone, scrolling through the daily revenue figures. Her eyes widened. "Does Mom know?" I shook my head. "They'll believe it when they see it. I'm playing the long game here." By the 18-month mark, my self-imposed deadline, Green Home Essentials was generating consistent 6-figure monthly revenue. I'd expanded to 3 warehouse locations, hired 6 full-time employees, and was sleeping soundly through the night. I bought my parents a vacation package to Alaska, a dream trip they'd talked about for years, but never taken. "Just because," I told them, downplaying the significance. My father pulled me aside before they left. "Your mother worries about you," he said. "Says you never mention looking for a real job anymore." I smiled. "Tell her I'm doing fine, Dad." He studied my face, nodded once, and patted my shoulder. The closest he could come to acknowledging I might have been right. The second year brought new challenges. Copycats emerged, undercutting my prices, supply chain issues delayed inventory. Amazon changed algorithms that affected my visibility, but now I had something I hadn't had at the beginning: experience, resources, resilience. Each problem became a puzzle to solve rather than a disaster to survive. I launched 2 more stores in adjacent niches, expanded into wholesale, created a private label brand that commanded premium prices. The business grew exponentially, not just in revenue, but in stability and infrastructure. I was no longer a solopreneur, scrambling to keep up. I was building systems, hiring specialists, creating something with real staying power. 3 years in, I bought a house, nothing flashy, but mine, paid for in cash. No mortgage. At the housewarming, Uncle Frank pulled me aside. "I didn't think you'd stick with it this long," he admitted, sipping his bourbon. "Figured you'd be back at Meridian by now." I smiled. "Turns out there's good money in bamboo spoons." He laughed, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, trying to reconcile his nephew the consultant with Nathan the e-commerce entrepreneur. I never flaunted my success, never pulled out revenue reports at family gatherings or boasted about growth percentages. I'd seen too many flash-in-the-pan businesses, too many entrepreneurs who celebrated too early. Besides, the validation I needed wasn't external anymore. I'd proven to myself what was possible. The milestone I'd set for success kept moving. First, it was matching my consulting salary, then financial independence, then building something I could sell if I chose to. With each goal achieved, my vision expanded. This wasn't just about escaping the corporate grind anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, sustainable, impactful. 4 years in, a major home goods retailer approached me about acquiring Green Home Essentials. The offer was substantial, life-changing money by most standards. I spent weeks in negotiations, due diligence, meetings with lawyers. In the end, I walked away. Not because the offer wasn't fair, but because I wasn't done building yet. The business still had room to grow, and more importantly, I was still learning, still engaged, still finding purpose in the daily challenges. That same month, my cousin Jeremy, Uncle Frank's son, called me out of the blue. "Dad says your business is doing well," he said hesitantly. "I've been thinking about trying something similar. Would you be willing to show me how you did it?" I invited him to my office, a real office now, with a team of 20, people working across marketing, operations, product development. As we walked through the space, I could see his perspective shifting. This wasn't a lucky break or a temporary success. This was a real business, with infrastructure and processes and momentum. Over lunch, Jeremy confessed, "I always thought you were crazy for leaving Meridian. We all did. But now—" He gestured vaguely at everything around us. "How did you know it would work?" "I didn't," I told him honestly. "I just knew I had to try, that the regret of not trying would be worse than the risk of failure." 5 years after leaving Meridian, I hit a personal milestone, $10 million in liquid assets. Not counting the business itself, enough to live comfortably on investment returns alone. At 40 years old, I had achieved what most people spend their entire careers working toward: financial independence. The freedom to work because I wanted to, not because I needed to. I didn't make a big announcement, didn't send a group text or update my LinkedIn status, but at Thanksgiving that year, exactly 7 years after that uncomfortable dinner where my career choices had been public fodder, my mother asked the question. She always asked, "How's the business going, Nathan?" Before I could give my standard "it's going well" response, my father interjected, "For heaven's sake, Margaret, the boy's a millionaire. I think we can stop asking if his business is viable." A stunned silence fell over the table. My father, who had never publicly acknowledged my success, who had worried and doubted and feared for my security, had finally accepted the truth that had been in front of him for years. Uncle Frank raised his glass. "To Nathan," he said simply, "who saw something the rest of us didn't. Looking around that table, at the family who had doubted me, who had worried about me, who had been certain I was making a catastrophic mistake, I felt no resentment. Their concerns had come from love, from their own experiences in a world where security came from stability, from known pathways and predictable careers. They couldn't have understood what I was building because it didn't exist in their framework of success. I hadn't just changed my career. I'd chosen a path that required a different definition of what success and security looked like. As we ate pumpkin pie, my nephew, 12 years old and already comfortable in the digital world in a way his parents would never be, asked me, "Uncle Nate, how much money do you make now?" Before his mother could scold him for the inappropriate question, I smiled and said, "Enough to be able to choose what I do with my time, and that's the greatest luxury of all." Later, as coffee was being served, my sister pulled me aside. "Jeremy says you've been mentoring him on his side business," she said. "Thank you for that. He needed a different model, I think, of what's possible." That night, driving home to my comfortable but not extravagant house, I reflected on the journey, the sleepless nights, the financial risks, the doubt and fear that had been constant companions in those early days. The lessons learned through failure, the skills developed through necessity, the confidence built through overcoming obstacles. Would I have taken the leap if I'd known how difficult it would be? Probably not. But that's the beautiful deception of entrepreneurship. It reveals its true nature only after you're already committed, after retreat becomes more painful than pressing forward. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, made coffee, read the news, answered a few emails. At 10 a.m. I had a strategy call with my executive team, people far more specialized in their areas than I could ever be, who had joined the mission because they believed in what we were building. My phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Just got my first $1,000 day. Still can't believe this is real." I smiled, remembering that feeling. The disbelief, the validation, the first concrete evidence that the crazy leap might actually have wings. I typed back, "That's just the beginning. Keep building." Because that's the truth I've learned through this journey. Success isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process of creation, adaptation, growth. The freedom I've gained isn't just financial independence, though that's certainly valuable. It's the freedom to build something aligned with my values, to create opportunity for others, to define success on my own terms. As for my family, they may never fully understand the path I've chosen, may never feel the exhilaration of creating something from nothing, of watching an idea transform into a thriving enterprise. But they've come to respect it, to acknowledge its validity, to recognize that there are many routes to a meaningful life. And sometimes their silence, the absence of concern, of skepticism, of well-intentioned warnings, speaks volumes more than words ever could. This isn't a story about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right, about having the courage to follow your instincts when all the traditional wisdom points in the opposite direction. About building something not just profitable, but meaningful, something that reflects your values and vision of the world. 7 years ago, I sat at that Thanksgiving table burning with embarrassment as my family questioned my judgment. Today, I sit at my desk, looking out at the business I've built, the team I've assembled, the customers we serve, filled with a quiet certainty that I made the right choice, not because it made me rich, but because it made me free. And that freedom, more than any dollar amount, is what I'm truly grateful for. The day after I cleared out my desk at Meridian Consulting, reality hit with the force of a freight train. Standing in my kitchen at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, a time when I'd normally be trapped in a conference room debating market penetration strategies, I felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. The silence of my apartment was deafening. No emails pinging, no colleagues stopping by with urgent questions, no clients demanding immediate attention, just me, a half-empty cup of coffee, and the weight of my decision pressing down on my shoulders. I'd spent the previous night setting up my makeshift office in the spare bedroom, a folding table from Target, my personal laptop, and a whiteboard propped against the wall. Nothing like the gleaming mahogany desk and dual monitors I'd left behind. The contrast was stark and humbling. I'd traded certainty for possibility, stability for potential, and in that moment the trade felt desperately uneven. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Just checking in. How are you feeling today?" The subtext was clear. "Have you come to your senses yet? I typed back a breezy response about setting up my new office and feeling excited about the road ahead. The words felt hollow, a performance of confidence I didn't fully possess. The truth was more complicated. I'd done my research, created detailed business plans, run the numbers until my eyes blurred. I had 18 months of living expenses saved, barely enough if I lived frugally. I'd identified my niche, vetted suppliers, built a rudimentary website. On paper, everything looked viable, but plans and reality rarely align perfectly, and the gap between them is where doubt flourishes. That first week, I established a rigorous routine. Up at 6 a.m., exercise, shower, dress in proper work clothes, no pajama workdays for me. I needed the psychological structure of treating this like a real job because it was. More than that, it was a business that needed to succeed if I wanted to keep a roof over my head and prove my family's concerns unfounded. My initial strategy was straightforward: source high-quality, eco-friendly kitchen products that solved common problems, market them effectively to environmentally conscious consumers, and build a brand that stood for sustainability without sacrificing functionality. The sustainable products market was growing, but not yet saturated. There was still room for a thoughtfully curated store with a clear value proposition. I spent the first month finalizing supplier contracts. This was familiar territory, negotiating terms, reviewing samples, securing favorable payment conditions. My consulting background proved unexpectedly valuable here. I spoke the language of business, understood margin requirements, knew how to structure agreements that protected my interests. The suppliers in China and Vietnam didn't need to know that Green Home Essentials was just me in a spare bedroom in Chicago rather than an established retail operation. Reality check came in the form of inventory. I'd calculated that I needed at least 40 products to launch a credible store: bamboo utensil sets, reusable produce bags, silicone food storage solutions, and other kitchen essentials. The minimum order quantities pushed my initial investment higher than anticipated. $42,000 disappeared from my savings account in a single wire transfer, leaving my financial cushion dangerously thin. The day the first shipment arrived was surreal. The delivery driver looked confused as he unloaded box after box at my apartment door. "Business address?" he asked skeptically. I nodded, helping him stack the packages in my living room until they formed a cardboard mountain that blocked the television. That night, I sat on my couch surrounded by inventory, the physical manifestation of my risk, and felt the first twinge of genuine panic. What if none of it sold? What if I'd miscalculated the market entirely? My younger brother Mike called that evening, the only family member who seemed genuinely supportive of my venture. "How's it going, entrepreneur?" he asked, the warmth in his voice a balm for my frayed nerves. I described the mountain of inventory, the reality of what I'd committed to. "Remember when you taught me to swim at the lake house?" he said unexpectedly. "You told me to stop thinking about drowning and just focus on the next stroke. Same thing, different water." His words stayed with me as I tackled the next phase, launching the website and marketing campaigns. I'd built the e-commerce platform, myself using Shopify, learning through tutorials and forums. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. Clean design, straightforward navigation, compelling product descriptions I'd written and rewritten until each word felt right. Marketing proved more challenging. I'd authorized large advertising budgets at Meridian, but spending my own dwindling funds required a different calculus entirely. Every dollar spent on Facebook ads or Google keywords was a dollar that couldn't go toward rent or food if the business failed. I started small, testing different audiences, messages, and visuals with minimal daily spends, analyzing results obsessively, adjusting based on data rather than intuition. The first sale came 3 days after launch. the notification email jolted me awake at 2:37 a.m. Someone in Seattle had purchased a set of bamboo utensils and reusable produce bags. 40 tools, 98, plus shipping. I stared at my phone in the darkness, feeling a wave of validation wash over me. A complete stranger had found my store, evaluated my products, and decided they were worth spending money on. The psychological impact far outweighed the minimal profit. I packaged that first order with ridiculous care, neat craft paper wrapping, a handwritten thank you note, a small dried lavender sprig tied with twine. This wasn't just a transaction. It was the beginning of a relationship with my first customer, the first test of whether Green Home Essentials could deliver on its promises. More orders trickled in over the following weeks. 5 one day, 3 the next, occasionally a day with none, that would send me into a spiral of doubt. I became obsessive about metrics, conversion rates, cart abandonment, average order value, customer acquisition cost. Each number told a story, highlighted a problem to solve or an opportunity to seize. The learning curve was steep and unforgiving. I discovered that beautiful product photography mattered more than clever copy, that free shipping thresholds dramatically increased average order value, that email follow-ups with abandoned carts had a 23% recovery rate. Each insight was purchased with time, money, and occasionally painful mistakes. One such mistake nearly derailed everything. 3 months in, I placed a restock order for my best-selling bamboo utensil sets, doubling the quantity based on projected growth. What I failed to notice was that the supplier had subtly changed the design. The fork tines were shorter, the knife less effective. Customer complaints started rolling in almost immediately. Negative reviews appeared on the website and social media. Refund requests mounted. I stayed up for 36 hours straight, personally responding to every complaint, issuing refunds and apologies, negotiating with the supplier for replacements. I couldn't afford to alienate the small customer base I'd built or damage the fragile reputation of my fledgling brand. The mistake cost me nearly $4,000 in refunds and replacement inventory, money I couldn't spare. That weekend, I visited my parents for dinner, arriving exhausted and defeated. My father, a retired manufacturing plant manager who'd worked his way up from the factory floor over 40 years, studied my face across the pot roast. "Rough week in internet land?" he asked, his tone hovering between concern and "I told you so." I considered giving a sanitized version of events, preserving the illusion that everything was going according to plan. Instead, I told them the truth about the inventory issue, the financial hit, the sleepless nights spent salvaging customer relationships. My mother's forehead creased with worry. My father listened silently, cutting his meat with methodical precision. "When I was running the plant," he finally said, "we had a batch of defective hydraulic fittings go out to customers. Cost the company millions. Know what my boss told me? Jim, you're not being judged on whether you make mistakes. You're being judged on how you fix them." He pointed his fork at me. "Sounds like you're fixing it right." It wasn't ringing. Endorsement of my business. But it was the first time he'd engaged with it as something legitimate rather than a phase to be endured. I drove home feeling marginally better, though the financial reality remained unchanged. At the current burn rate, my runway was shortening alarmingly. Something needed to change. I spent the next week reviewing every aspect of the business, identifying inefficiencies, opportunities for optimization. The data showed that certain products, particularly the bamboo utensil sets and reusable food storage solutions, had significantly higher margins and conversion rates than others. The logical move was to double down on what was working, but that required capital I no longer had. I reluctantly called Uncle Frank, swallowing my pride, not to ask for a job back, but for a loan. He agreed to meet for coffee, listening impassively as I walked him through the business financials, the early traction, the specific opportunity I saw to scale the top-performing products. "How much?" he asked when I finished. I told him I needed $50,000 to secure inventory and expand marketing for the highest performing products. He leaned back, considering. "You're asking me to invest in a business that sells fancy wooden spoons on the internet." "Sustainable kitchen solutions," I corrected automatically. "And yes, I'm offering 8% interest, repaid within 18 months, with the inventory as collateral." He studied me for a long moment. "You really believe in this, don't you?" "I do." "Then why come to me? Why not a bank, or one of those internet fundraising things?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because I need the money quickly, and because I'd rather pay interest to family than to a financial institution. But this is a business proposal, not a favor. I'll sign whatever paperwork you want." 2 days later, the money was in my business account, accompanied by a formal loan agreement drawn up by Uncle Frank's attorney. The terms were fair but stringent, monthly payments beginning after 90 days, personal guarantee, detailed reporting requirements. Uncle Frank hadn't built his career by making sentimental financial decisions, not even for family. The infusion of capital allowed me to execute the strategy I'd identified. I focused on scaling the top-performing products, negotiated better. Pricing based on higher volumes, expanded the marketing budget for channels that had proven effective. I hired a part-time virtual assistant in the Philippines to handle customer service emails and order processing, freeing me to focus on growth initiatives. The business began to gain real momentum. Daily orders increased from a handful to dozens. I expanded from my apartment to a small warehouse space in an industrial area on the city's west side. Nothing glamorous, just 200 square feet with concrete floors and fluorescent lighting, but it was a legitimate business address with space. For proper inventory management, 6 months in, I had my first $10,000 sales week. I celebrated alone in the warehouse, sitting on an empty pallet with a bottle of decent whiskey, feeling a complex mixture of pride, exhaustion, and vindication. The business wasn't just surviving, it was growing steadily, methodically, profitably. Every system I'd built was scaling. Every hypothesis I'd tested was yielding actionable data. That same week, I received a LinkedIn message from Diane, my former HR colleague at Meridian. "Heard through the grapevine you're doing well with your venture. Not surprised. The partners still talk about the Westridge analysis you did. Nobody's matched that quality since you left. Thought you'd like to know." The validation from a former colleague, the acknowledgement that I'd left a gap that hadn't been easily filled, meant more than I expected. My identity had been so wrapped up in my corporate role for so long that stepping away had felt like amputating a part of myself. Diane's message was confirmation that I hadn't been easily replaceable there, just as I was now creating something that couldn't be easily replicated elsewhere. I began to find my rhythm as an entrepreneur. The early panic subsided, replaced by a more sustainable cadence of strategic thinking and tactical execution. I learned to separate personal identity from business outcomes, to see setbacks as data points rather than character judgments, to approach problems with curiosity rather than fear. My relationship with my family evolved in parallel. My parents stopped asking when I was going to get a real job and started asking specific questions about the business. My mother mentioned my little company to her friends at church. My father sent me articles about supply chain optimization with notes like, "Thought this might be useful." Small acknowledgements that what I was building had validity, even if they didn't fully understand it. Uncle Frank remained the hardest to win over. Our interactions were strictly professional, monthly financial updates, loan payment confirmations, occasional clarifying questions. He treated our arrangement as he would any business investment, which was both frustrating and oddly reassuring. He wasn't cutting me any slack, but he wasn't discounting me either. The real breakthrough came unexpectedly. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about sustainable business practices at a local entrepreneurship conference. Nothing major, just a small event at the community college, but my first public speaking engagement representing green home essentials. I mentioned it casually during a family dinner, not expecting much interest. "What time is this panel?" Uncle Frank asked, surprising everyone at the table. 3 o'clock next Thursday." He nodded, making a note in his phone. "I'll stop by." And he did. Slipped into the back of the room just as the moderator was introducing the panelists. I nearly stumbled over my opening remarks, so surprised by his presence that I momentarily lost my train of thought. But then I recovered, jumping into a discussion of how sustainable practices could be both environmentally responsible and good business strategy. Afterward, as attendees networked over lukewarm coffee, Uncle Frank approached. "Not bad," he said, which from him was high praise indeed. "Your point about transparency in the supply chain, that's something we've been discussing at the firm. Would you have time for coffee next week? Strictly professional. I have some questions about your approach." That coffee meeting turned into a regular monthly discussion, never warm, never particularly personal, but undeniably respectful. Uncle Frank began treating me as he would any business owner with relevant expertise, someone worth listening to, someone whose perspective had value. It was, in its way, the most meaningful endorsement I'd received. As the first anniversary of launching Green Home Essentials approached, I took stock of where things stood. The business had grown from zero to consistent six-figure monthly revenue. I'd repaid half of Uncle Frank's loan ahead of schedule. I had 3 part-time employees helping with warehouse operations and customer service. The product line had expanded strategically, with each new addition carefully tested and validated before scaling. More importantly, I had proof of concept, not just financial viability, but confirmation that my vision for the business was sound. Customers weren't just buying products. They were becoming advocates, returning for additional purchases, recommending us to friends and family. The eco-friendly kitchen niche was growing, but our specific approach, prioritizing functionality and durability alongside sustainability, was resonating in a crowded marketplace. I'd stopped checking job listings or maintaining my corporate connections as backup plans. This wasn't a detour or a sabbatical from my real career. This was my career now, building something of value from nothing but an idea and the courage to pursue it. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more productive, a healthy respect for risk that informed decisions rather than paralyzing them. My 1-year anniversary as an entrepreneur passed quietly. No office celebration, no recognition from colleagues, no performance review or bonus announcement, just another Tuesday in the warehouse, packing orders, analyzing marketing data, planning inventory for the holiday season. And yet, as I locked up that evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment more profound than anything I'd experienced in corporate America. I'd faced the void, the terrifying uncertainty of stepping away from everything familiar and secure, and built something sustainable on the other side, something that reflected my values, leveraged my strengths, and grew more from passion than obligation, something that was entirely mine, for better or worse. That night I updated my financial projections based on the first year's performance data. The trajectory was clear and compelling. Barring dramatic market shifts or catastrophic mistakes, Green Home Essentials would generate enough profit within the next 3 to 5 years to provide financial independence. Not extravagant wealth, but enough passive income from a semi-automated business to live comfortably without being dependent on active work. It was a startling realization. At Meridian, I'd been on a predictable trajectory, senior consultant to principal to partner, with corresponding incremental increases in compensation and status. 25 more years of client meetings and PowerPoint decks, accumulating enough For a comfortable retirement at 65 if I managed my investments prudently. The standard playbook. This new path offered something different, not just earlier financial freedom, but a different relationship with work itself, building systems rather than trading time for money, creating assets rather than selling expertise. The potential to reach enough and then choose what came next based on meaning rather than necessity. I printed out the projection and pinned it to the wall of my small warehouse office. Not as a guarantee, but as a reminder of what was possible, a concrete answer to the doubtful voices, both external and internal, that had questioned my decision at every turn. The next morning, I received an email that would accelerate everything. "We've been customers for 6 months now and love your products," it began. "Our retail store in Portland focuses on sustainable home goods, and we'd be interested in carrying your line. Is wholesale an option you're considering?" I stared at the screen, momentarily stunned by the implications. Wholesale had been in my long-term plans, but I'd assumed it was at least another year away. Yet here was an opportunity presenting itself organically, a chance to expand distribution, increase volume, build credibility through brick-and-mortar presence. I called Mike immediately. "I need advice," I said when he answered. "I just got a wholesale inquiry, and I'm not sure I'm ready." I explained the opportunity and my concerns, the need for different pricing structures, higher inventory levels, new fulfillment processes. "Remember what you always told me," he replied. "Growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. You've been planning for this, even if it's coming sooner than expected. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing to figure it out as you go." He was right, of course. Using my own advice against me, the little brother I'd mentored through college and early career, now mentoring me through entrepreneurial growing pains. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. That afternoon, I responded to the Portland store, proposing a limited initial wholesale arrangement, a curated selection of our best-selling products, minimum order quantities that we could realistically fulfill, wholesale pricing that preserved acceptable margins while offering the retailer standard keystone markup. They accepted immediately and placed an order that was larger than anticipated. I scrambled to adjust inventory plans, negotiate expedited production with suppliers, develop proper wholesale documentation and shipping processes. It was chaotic and stressful, but exhilarating too, concrete evidence that the business was ready for its next evolution. The Portland store's order was just the beginning. They featured our products prominently, shared images on their popular Instagram account, introduced us to other independent retailers in their network. Within 2 months, we had wholesale relationships with 14 stores across the country, each a carefully selected partner that aligned with our brand values and target demographic. The wholesale business grew in parallel with our direct-to-consumer, e-commerce, each channel reinforcing the other. Retail presence built brand credibility that boosted online sales. Online customer reviews provided social proof that helped wholesale partners sell through their inventory. As the business expanded, so did my confidence. Not the brash overconfidence of inexperience, but the grounded self-assurance that comes from navigating real challenges and emerging stronger. I'd made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I'd learned from each one, building a repertoire of hard-won knowledge that no business school could provide. The most valuable lesson wasn't about e-commerce strategies or inventory management or digital marketing tactics, though I'd certainly mastered those. It was about trust. Trusting my own judgment, trusting the process of methodical growth, trusting that meaningful success was possible outside the conventional pathways my family had always valued. 18 months after walking away from Meridian Consulting, I made the final payment on Uncle Frank's loan, 3 months ahead of schedule. I didn't make a production of it, simply transferred the funds with a brief email noting that the obligation had been fulfilled in full, with interest as agreed. His response came the same day. Congratulations. Not many businesses succeed in their early stages, especially ones started by people with no prior entrepreneurial experience. You've beaten the odds. What's your next move? It wasn't quite approval, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that what I'd built was legitimate, sustainable, worthy of respect. From Uncle Frank, that was enough. The rest of my family had gradually come around in their own ways, their initial skepticism giving way to cautious support as the business demonstrated staying power. But their validation, while welcome, was no longer the driving force it had once been. I'd found something more valuable, the quiet certainty that comes from creating something authentic, something aligned with your values and vision, something that stands on its own merits, regardless of external opinion. Looking out at the warehouse floor, now busy with staff preparing wholesale orders alongside direct customer shipments, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This path, with all its uncertainty and challenges, was where I belonged. Not because it was easier, it was decidedly not, but because it was mine. Chosen deliberately, built methodically, aligned completely with who I was and what I valued. The journey was far from over. Each new phase of growth brought fresh challenges, unexpected obstacles, opportunities that required evolution and adaptation. But I was no longer the anxious former consultant sitting in a makeshift home office, doubting every decision. I was a business owner with a proven model, a clear vision, and the resilience to navigate whatever came next. And that transformation, from corporate employee to entrepreneur, from someone defined by external validation to someone guided by internal conviction, was worth every sleepless night, every financial risk, every moment of doubt along the way. 2 years into building Green Home Essentials, I faced a decision that would determine whether the business remained a comfortable lifestyle company or evolved into something with significant scale. An acquisition offer had landed in my inbox from Eco-Living Brands, a conglomerate that had been buying up small to mid-sized sustainable product companies. Their initial offer, $1.2 million, was tempting on paper, life-changing money for most people, enough to pay off my modest mortgage and invest the remainder for a comfortable passive income. I printed the offer letter and brought it to Sunday. Dinner at my parents' house, curious about their reaction. My father studied the document carefully, adjusting his reading glasses. "Sounds like a lot of money," he finally said, sliding the paper back across the table. "You thinking about taking it?" It was exactly the practical question I'd expect from him. Not congratulations on building something valuable enough to attract acquisition interest, but a straightforward inquiry about my next move. I appreciated the directness. "I'm considering it," I replied, though in truth I'd already made my decision. "But the business is growing at about 40% year over year. If that continues, it'll be worth substantially more in another 2 years. My mother, who had been quietly listening, placed her hand on mine. "Is it just about the money, Nathan? You seem happier running this business than you ever did at the consulting firm. Would you still work there if you sold it?" Her observation caught me off guard. My mother had been the most overtly worried about my career change, the one who'd clipped job listings from the newspaper during my first year as an entrepreneur. Yet she'd noticed something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself, that beyond the financial success, I'd found genuine fulfillment in building Green Home. "They want me to stay on for a 1-year transition," I explained, "but after that I'd be out. And no, it's not just about the money. I'm not done building yet." Uncle Frank, who'd joined us for dinner, raised an eyebrow. "Turning down 7 figures takes confidence, or foolishness." But there was no judgment in his tone, just professional curiosity. "What's your growth strategy?" that makes you so certain it's worth more? It was the opening I'd been waiting for, a chance to articulate the vision that had been crystallizing. Over the past 6 months, I outlined my three-pronged approach: expanding our wholesale presence nationally, developing a premium private label line with higher margins, and launching a commercial division targeting eco-conscious restaurants and hotels. Uncle Frank listened intently, asking pointed questions about margin structures and growth projections, not challenging my decision, but engaging with it seriously, treating me not as a nephew who'd left a promising career for an internet experiment, but as a business owner with a legitimate strategic vision. "The numbers make sense," he concluded, "but execution is everything. You'll need systems, people, capital, different challenges from what you've faced so far." "I know," I acknowledged. "That's why I'm bringing on a COO next month. Someone with experience scaling operations. I can't keep doing everything myself." This announcement elicited a small smile from my father. Hiring your first executive, moving up in the world. It was as close to explicit approval as he'd ever offered, and I felt a warm rush of validation. Not that I needed it anymore. My confidence had gradually shifted from external sources to internal certainty, but it was meaningful nonetheless. The family that had once questioned my judgment was now engaging with my business decisions on their merits. Progress, slow but unmistakable. I declined Eco-Living's offer the following day, countering with a courtesy email explaining that we weren't seeking acquisition at this stage, but would keep them in mind if circumstances changed. Their response was swift: an increased offer of $1, 5 million plus performance incentives that could push the total to $1, $8 million. The persistence was flattering but didn't change my calculus. Green Home had evolved from a survival necessity into something I genuinely loved building. The day-to-day challenges, the strategic decisions, the team I was assembling, all of it energized rather than depleted me. I wasn't ready to exchange that for a liquidity event, substantial as it might be. My focus shifted to execution. I'd made bold claims about growth potential. Now came the harder work of delivering on those projections. The most critical piece was finding the right operations leader, someone with the experience to build scalable systems, but the flexibility to thrive in a still-evolving company culture. After interviewing 23 candidates, I found Marta Rodriguez, a former operations director at a mid-sized consumer packaged goods company who'd grown restless in corporate America. She had the credentials I needed, but also something rarer: genuine enthusiasm for sustainable products and the mission behind Green Home. "Most companies I talk to are just trying to capitalize on eco-trends," she told me during our final interview. "You're building something authentic. I want to be part of that." Bringing Marta on board was transformative. She immediately identified inefficiencies I'd been too close to see. Fulfillment processes that worked at smaller volumes but created bottlenecks at scale. Inventory systems that relied too heavily on my personal oversight. Quality control measures that wouldn't survive significant growth. More importantly, she freed me to focus on strategic growth while she handled day-to-day operations. For the first time since launching Green Home, I could work on the business rather than in it, developing new product lines, nurturing key wholesale relationships, exploring the commercial market opportunity I'd identified. The wholesale channel expanded rapidly under this divided focus. From 14 retail partners, we grew to over 80 stores nationwide within 6 months. Each new retailer not only generated reliable revenue, but also served as a brand ambassador, introducing Green Home products to customers who might never have found us online. The premium line took longer to develop, but promised higher margins. Once launched, we worked with industrial designers to create kitchen tools that weren't just sustainable, but beautiful, objects that people would proudly display rather than hide in drawers. sleek bamboo and recycled metal utensils with ergonomic handles, food storage containers in subtle, sophisticated colors derived from natural pigments, cutting boards that doubled as serving platters, hand-finished with food-safe oils. The development costs were significant, but the potential return justified the investment. These weren't commodity products competing on price. They were design pieces that commanded premium positioning. Early feedback from select retailers was enthusiastic, confirming our hypothesis about market demand for elevated, eco-friendly kitchen tools. The commercial division started smaller, a pilot program with 3 farm-to-table restaurants in Chicago that aligned with our sustainability ethos. We developed industrial-grade versions of our consumer products designed to withstand the rigors of professional kitchens while maintaining eco-friendly credentials. The initial orders were modest, but the potential for scaled deployment across restaurant groups represented significant growth opportunity. As the business expanded in complexity, so did my responsibilities. I was no longer just an entrepreneur managing a small e-commerce operation. I was the CEO of a growing company with employees depending on me for their livelihoods, customers trusting our brand promises, suppliers building their own businesses around our orders. The weight of these responsibilities was substantial but energizing, purpose-driven stress rather than the empty anxiety I'd known in corporate America. 3 years into the journey, Greenhome crossed a meaningful threshold: $5 million in annual revenue. We celebrated with a team lunch at the warehouse, now a 5,000-square-foot facility with proper offices, efficient packing stations, and streamlined inventory management systems. Looking around at the 15 full-time employees who joined the mission, I felt a profound sense of creation. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a community built around shared values and purpose. The milestone prompted a rare, direct compliment from Uncle Frank when I mentioned it at a family gathering. "You've built something real," he acknowledged, his tone matter-of-fact but his words carefully chosen. Not just a side hustle or a temporary success, a legitimate company with staying power. Coming from him, a man who'd evaluated businesses his entire career, the assessment carried weight that transcended family dynamics. My parents' attitude had evolved as well. My father now proudly mentioned my son's company to his friends, sometimes exaggerating our size or reach in ways that amused rather than annoyed me. My mother had stopped sending job listings entirely, instead forwarding articles about sustainable business or eco-friendly innovations she thought might interest me. Small gestures that reflected a larger shift, from concern to pride, from skepticism to support. That same month, an unexpected email arrived from Craig Phillips, a former colleague from Meridian Consulting who'd risen to partner since my departure. "In Chicago next week for client meetings. Time for coffee? Professional question I'd like your input on." We met at a downtown coffee shop, Craig looking exactly as I remembered, impeccably tailored suit, precise haircut, the practiced ease of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. After brief pleasantries, he got to the point. "One of our key clients is looking to reposition their housewares division with an eco-friendly line. They've tried developing in-house, but the results lack authenticity. We're recommending they acquire an established brand instead. Someone with credibility in the space." He paused, gauging my reaction. "Greenhome is on our short list of potential acquisition targets." The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years earlier, I'd been a mid-level consultant at Meridian. Now I was sitting across from a partner, discussing my company as an acquisition target for their client. Life's circular paths occasionally revealed themselves in startling ways. "We're not actively seeking acquisition," I replied, the same response I'd given eco-living. Craig nodded, unsurprised. "I expected as much, but the client is serious. They're prepared to make a compelling offer. Would you at least consider having the conversation? I agreed to a preliminary discussion, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Representatives from Westfield Home Goods, accompanied by Craig and another Meridian partner, touring our facility and discussing potential synergies. The day before the meeting, I received an unexpected call from Uncle Frank. "Heard you're talking to Westfield tomorrow," he said, without preamble. The business community in Chicago was smaller than it appeared. Information traveled through invisible networks of relationships and connections. "Just a preliminary discussion," I confirmed. "Nothing serious." "Westfield is serious," he countered. "They've been looking for an authenticity play in the sustainable space for over a year. They have capital allocated for acquisition. If they're meeting you in person, they're beyond tire kicking." He paused, and I waited for the advice I assumed was coming. Practical guidance on valuation multiples or negotiation tactics. Instead, he asked a question. "What do you actually want, Nathan? Not what makes financial sense on paper. What do you want for yourself and for the business you've built?" It was precisely the question I needed to clarify my own thinking. "I want Greenhome to grow beyond what I could build alone," I answered. "Honestly, I want our approach to sustainability to reach more households, but I don't want to see it diluted or compromised for quarterly earnings requirements. And personally, I'm not ready to walk away. This isn't just a business to me anymore. It's a mission." "Then you need to approach tomorrow's meeting differently," Uncle Frank advised. "Not as a potential exit, but as a potential partnership. Structure determines outcome. If you enter the conversation thinking like a seller, that's the path you'll follow. Think like a strategist instead." The insight shifted my perspective completely. When the Westfield executives arrived the next morning, accompanied by the Meridian team, I welcomed them not as potential acquirers, but as potential partners in a larger mission. The subtle distinction shaped everything that followed. Rather than focusing on our financial performance, though those numbers were certainly impressive, I emphasized our brand integrity, our customer loyalty, our authentic approach to sustainability. I walked them through our product development philosophy, our supplier relationships built on ethical practices, our community engagement initiatives. Greenhome isn't just sustainable in its products, I explained as we toured the facility. Sustainability is built into our business model, our company culture, our long-term vision. That's what our customers connect with, not just eco-friendly materials, but genuine commitment to environmental principles. The Westfield CEO, a veteran executive named Diane Mercer, studied me thoughtfully. "What are you looking for, Mr. Reed? You don't seem particularly interested in acquisition." "I'm interested in impact," I replied. "Greenhome can grow faster with the right partner, reach more consumers, influence more purchasing decisions, but maintaining our brand integrity is non-negotiable." The meeting shifted into a different conversation entirely, not about acquisition terms, but about strategic partnership possibilities, distribution through Westfield's extensive retail network, access to their manufacturing capabilities for certain product categories, shared sustainability initiatives that could benefit both brands while advancing environmental causes. When they left 3 hours later, no formal offers had been made, but a new possibility had emerged: strategic investment rather than outright acquisition. Westfield would take a minority stake in Greenhome, providing capital for accelerated growth while leaving us operational independence and brand autonomy. Over the following weeks, the discussions evolved into serious negotiations. Marta and I developed a detailed 5-year growth plan, identifying specific areas where Westfield's resources could accelerate our expansion without compromising our core values. Financial models were built and refined, showing projected revenue growth that benefited both entities. The final agreement, reached after 6 weeks of careful negotiation, exceeded my initial expectations. Westfield would acquire a 30% stake in Greenhome for $4 million, valuing the company at $13.3 million. Overall, the capital would fund expansion into international markets, development of additional product categories, and enhanced manufacturing capabilities. Critical to the deal were the autonomy provisions I'd insisted upon. I would remain CEO with full operational control. Greenhome would maintain its separate brand identity and sustainability standards. We would gain access to Westfield's retail distribution network, but weren't obligated to compromise our product integrity or pricing. Strategy. The day we signed the final agreement marked a profound milestone, not just financially, but in terms of business evolution. What had started as a desperate leap from corporate security had transformed into a multi-million-dollar company with significant growth potential and major corporate backing. That evening, I invited my family to dinner at an upscale restaurant to share the news. My parents, Uncle Frank, my brother Mike and his wife gathered around a private dining table as I explained the partnership in straightforward terms: the investment amount, the valuation, the growth strategy it would enable. "So you're rich now?" Mike asked with characteristic bluntness, breaking the momentary silence that followed my announcement. "On paper," I clarified. "Most of my equity is still illiquid. But yes, by conventional standards, the valuation makes me a millionaire several times over." My father cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically emotional. "When you left Meridian, we thought—" He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "We were concerned you were giving up security for a dream that might not materialize." "We were wrong," my mother finished simply, "and we couldn't be prouder of what you've built." Uncle Frank raised his glass. "To Nathan," he said, his usual reserve softened by genuine respect, "who saw opportunities the rest of us missed and had the courage to pursue them." The validation was sweet, but what struck me most profoundly was how much less I needed it than I once had. 3 years earlier, their approval had seemed essential. Confirmation that I hadn't made a catastrophic mistake, reassurance that I still had worth despite stepping off the conventional path. Now, their recognition was welcome, but supplementary to something more foundational: my own certainty about the value I'd created, the business I'd built, the purpose that drove me forward. The journey had transformed not just my professional identity, but my relationship with validation itself, from external dependency to internal conviction. The Westfield partnership accelerated Greenhome's growth trajectory dramatically. Within months, our products were available in over 400 retail locations nationwide. The international expansion began with Canada and the UK, markets with strong eco-conscious consumer segments and regulatory environments supportive of sustainable products. Our team grew to 35 full-time employees, necessitating a move to a larger facility with proper corporate offices alongside expanded warehouse operations. The culture remained intentionally casual. No corner offices or executive dining rooms, but the infrastructure became increasingly sophisticated to support our growing complexity. 4 years after launching Greenhome from my spare bedroom, I found myself leading a company valued at over $13 million, with products in thousands of households across multiple countries and a clear path to continued expansion. The financial security this provided was substantial. I could extract enough liquidity to live very comfortably without working another day in my life. But that was never the point. The purpose that had emerged through building Greenhome, creating products that helped consumers make more sustainable choices without sacrificing functionality, continued to drive me forward. The mission had expanded rather than diminished with success, encompassing larger goals for environmental impact and market influence. What had changed most profoundly was my relationship with risk and uncertainty. The leap that had once seemed terrifying, walking away from corporate security with no guarantee of success, now appeared in retrospect as the most consequential decision of my life. Not because it had led to financial reward, though that was certainly welcome, but because it had revealed capacities I might never have discovered otherwise. The ability to build something from nothing, the resilience to weather setbacks without retreating, the creativity to solve problems with limited resources, the wisdom to recognize when to persist and when to pivot. These were muscles developed through necessity that had become core strengths, applicable not just to business, but to life itself. As I approached my 38th birthday, I realized that financial independence was now a mathematical certainty rather than an aspirational goal. Between Green Home's continued growth, the liquidity from the Westfield investment, and prudent personal investments, I was on track to achieve complete financial freedom by age 40. The ability to live comfortably on passive income indefinitely. This realization prompted deeper questions about purpose and legacy. What would success mean beyond financial metrics? How could Green Home's influence extend beyond commercial transactions to meaningful environmental impact? What role would I play as the company matured from startup to established brand? These weren't questions I'd anticipated asking when I'd first left Meridian, focused then on basic survival and proof of concept. They were luxury problems in the best sense. Challenges born of success rather than failure, opportunities to define meaning rather than merely secure provision. As Green Home continued its upward trajectory, my focus shifted from growth for its own sake to growth with purpose, expansion that multiplied positive impact rather than merely increasing revenue. This orientation influenced everything from product development to marketing strategies, to hiring decisions, creating a company increasingly aligned with values beyond profit. The family that had once mocked my decision now pointed to my journey as an example of courage and vision. The same uncle who had offered me a safety net job now referred emerging entrepreneurs to me for mentorship. The parents who had worried about my security now boasted about my success to anyone who would listen. Their evolution mirrored my own. From fear of uncertainty to embrace of possibility, from rigid definitions of success to more expansive understanding of fulfillment. We had all been transformed by this journey, though mine had certainly been the most profound metamorphosis. Looking toward the milestone of financial independence at 40, I felt neither triumphant nor vindicated, but simply grateful for the courage to take that first uncertain step, for the resilience to weather the inevitable storms, for the clarity that had emerged through building something authentic and impactful. The mockery that had once stung now seemed like a necessary part of the journey, resistance that had strengthened my resolve, skepticism that had demanded deeper commitment, doubt that had required greater clarity of purpose. Without that friction, the achievement might have meant less. The lessons might have cut less deep. As Green Home approached its 5th anniversary, I began planning the next phase of evolution, both for the company and for myself. The path ahead was neither certain nor easy, but it was unquestionably mine to shape, free from the constraints of financial necessity or conventional expectations. That freedom to create, to choose, to define success on my own terms was the true wealth I'd accumulated, worth far more than any valuation multiple or bank balance. It was what I'd been seeking all along, though I hadn't been able to name it when I'd first walked away from corporate security 5 years earlier. And it was what I now sought to extend to others through mentorship, through creating meaningful work opportunities within Green Home, through building a company that embodied the possibility of aligning purpose with prosperity. Not to prove my family wrong, that motivation had long since faded, but to demonstrate what was possible when courage overcame comfort, when purpose transcended security, when authentic vision replaced conventional wisdom. The journey continued, richer and more complex with each passing year, unfolding in ways I could never have predicted, but increasingly shaped by intentional choice rather than external circumstance. And in that ongoing evolution lay the deepest satisfaction, not in having arrived, but in continuing to become. 5 years into building Green Home Essentials, I found myself at a crossroads that would define the next chapter of both the company and my personal journey. The Westfield partnership had supercharged our growth, pushing annual revenue past $12 million with healthy profit margins that exceeded industry standards. Our products were available in over 800 retail locations across North America, the UK, and Australia. The team had expanded to 68 full-time employees working from our headquarters in Chicago and satellite offices in London and Toronto. By conventional metrics, we had achieved remarkable success. More importantly, we were genuinely moving the needle on sustainable consumer practices. Each bamboo utensil set, each silicone food storage container, each reusable produce bag represented a small victory over single-use plastics and disposable culture. Customer testimonials poured in daily, many expressing how Green Home products had been their gateway into more environmentally conscious living. Yet success brought its own complexities. The larger Green Home grew, the more I found myself pulled into management responsibilities rather than creative or strategic work. Days filled with budget reviews, department meetings, and investor relations left little time for the product innovation and brand development that had energized me at the start. I was leading a company I loved, but spending most of my time on tasks that drained rather than inspired me. "You need a president," Marta advised during one of our weekly strategy sessions. After 4 years as COO, she understood both the business and my strengths with rare clarity. Someone who loves the operational aspects that you tolerate. Someone who can run the day-to-day while you focus on vision and growth opportunities. The suggestion made intellectual sense, but triggered an emotional resistance I hadn't anticipated. Green Home was my creation, built from nothing through countless sleepless nights and risky decisions. The thought of stepping back, even partially, felt like abandoning a child I'd raised from infancy. "It's not about letting go," Marta continued, reading my hesitation accurately. "It's about growing beyond what you alone can manage. The company needs different skills at this scale. You're the visionary founder, not the professional manager." She was right, of course. The skills that had built Green Home from $0 to $1 million were different from those that had grown it to $5 million, which were different again from what was needed to scale past $20 million. Each phase required adaptation, evolution, willingness to become something new. The conversation catalyzed a period of deep reflection about my role and the company's future. I spent a weekend at a cabin in Wisconsin, alone with my thoughts and a legal pad, mapping the next 3 to 5 years for both Green Home and myself. What emerged was a strategic reorganization that would transform the company structure while preserving its core values and mission. I would transition to executive chairman, focusing on brand vision, strategic partnerships, and new market opportunities. We would hire an experienced president with large-scale consumer goods expertise to manage day-to-day operations, reporting to me, but with significant autonomy. The reorganization would create advancement paths for key team members while bringing in fresh perspectives at the executive level. Implementing this plan took 6 months of careful preparation. The search for the right president was exhaustive. 27 candidates interviewed, 4 brought back for second rounds, 1 clear standout who shared our values while bringing complementary skills. James Harrington had led sustainability initiatives at a major home goods manufacturer, combining corporate scalability knowledge with genuine environmental commitment. He understood both where we'd been and where we could go. The transition was announced at an all-hands meeting in our Chicago headquarters. I spoke candidly about the company's journey, my own strengths and limitations, and the growth opportunities that required new leadership structures. The reception was overwhelmingly positive. The team recognized the thoughtfulness behind the reorganization and appreciated the transparency about motivations and expectations. This isn't about stepping back, I explained, addressing the unstated concern directly. It's about structuring for scale. Greenhome has outgrown what any single person can effectively manage. This gives us room to expand our impact while maintaining the culture and values that make us unique. The reorganization coincided with our most ambitious expansion yet, a comprehensive office and kitchen line designed specifically for environmentally conscious businesses. Beyond selling individual products, we created complete sustainable workspace packages that companies could implement across their operations, from break rooms to executive suites. This B2B division required different sales approaches, account management systems, and fulfillment processes than our consumer business. James's experience proved invaluable here. He'd managed similar channel expansions and understood the distinct needs of corporate purchasing compared to retail or direct-to-consumer sales. The corporate line gained immediate traction, securing contracts with tech companies in the Bay Area and gradually expanding to other industries. Law firms adopting sustainable kitchen solutions for their break rooms, advertising agencies implementing plastic-free office environments, even manufacturing facilities replacing disposable items with our durable alternatives. Each corporate client represented hundreds or thousands of end users experiencing Greenhome products daily in their workplace. Subtle, environmental education through practical exposure. Many employees subsequently purchased items for their homes, creating a virtuous cycle of professional and personal adoption. This expansion pushed Greenhome into a new growth phase, diversifying revenue streams while reinforcing our core mission. Corporate sales had longer cycles, but larger volumes, and more stable projections than consumer retail. The balance between channels created resilience. When retail seasonality created natural downturns, corporate contracts provided steady baseline revenue. 6 months into the reorganization, the benefits had become clear. James excelled at operational leadership, implementing systems and processes that increased efficiency while maintaining quality. The executive team functioned cohesively, each member focusing on their areas of expertise rather than one person trying to oversee everything. My own role had evolved in unexpected ways. Freed from day-to-day management pressures, I rediscovered the creative energy that had launched Greenhome initially. New product concepts flowed more readily. Strategic opportunities became clearer without the fog of operational details. I found myself energized rather than exhausted at day's end, tackling challenges with renewed enthusiasm. The financial impact was equally positive. 6 months after the reorganization, monthly revenue had increased 32% compared to pre-transition numbers. Profitability improved by 18% through operational efficiencies James had implemented. The corporate division exceeded first-year projections within its first quarter, necessitating accelerated hiring to manage demand. These metrics reinforced what I'd intellectually understood but emotionally resisted. Greenhome had evolved beyond my personal capacity to manage effectively. The willingness to adapt my role had unlocked growth potential that benefited everyone: customers, employees, investors, and ultimately myself. My personal financial position had solidified accordingly. Between company profit distributions, the liquidity from Westfield's investment, and prudent personal investments, my net worth had crossed the $8 million threshold, more than enough to generate passive income that could sustain a comfortable lifestyle indefinitely. At 39 years old, I had achieved financial independence several decades ahead of the conventional retirement timeline. The realization was both exhilarating and disorienting. Freedom achieved so far in advance of expectation that it required recalibration of life's arc. The question was no longer how to accumulate enough, but what to do with abundance of both. Resources and time. A casual comment from my father during a family dinner highlighted this paradigm shift. "So, when are you planning to retire?" he asked as we cleared the table. "Seems like you're doing well enough to step away whenever you want." It was a reasonable question from his perspective. He'd worked 42 years at the manufacturing plant, climbing from entry level to management, saving diligently for a retirement he now enjoyed. In his worldview, the purpose of career success was eventually to stop working, to reach the finish line with enough accumulated resources to enjoy leisure in later years. "I don't think about it that way," I replied, after considering his question. "Green Home isn't just work I do to earn money until I can stop. It's purpose-driven, impact-focused. I'm not looking to retire from it so much as evolve with it." He seemed puzzled by this response, and I realized how fundamentally different our frames of reference had become. My father had worked a job, honorable, demanding work that supported his family and commanded respect, but fundamentally an exchange of time for money. I was building something that transcended that transactional relationship, creating value, aligned with personal meaning. This conversation catalyzed deeper reflection about the purpose of financial independence. If wealth wasn't primarily a means to stop working, what was it for? What responsibilities accompanied privilege? How could abundance be channeled toward meaningful impact rather than mere accumulation or consumption? These questions led to concrete actions. First, I established a personal foundation focused on environmental education and entrepreneurship. Support, initially funded with $1 million from my Westfield liquidity. The foundation would provide grants to schools implementing sustainability curricula and to early-stage entrepreneurs developing eco-friendly product innovations. Next, I began more active angel investing, focusing on startups addressing environmental challenges through innovative business models. Rather than passive check writing, I provided hands-on mentorship alongside capital, sharing lessons from Green Home's journey to help these founders avoid pitfalls and accelerate growth. Finally, I initiated conversations with the Green Home board about formalizing our impact mission through B Corporation certification, a rigorous assessment of social and environmental performance that would cement our commitment to balancing profit with purpose. The process would require operational adjustments and enhanced transparency, but would align with values we already embodied informally. These initiatives created a framework for meaningful engagement beyond financial accumulation, ways to leverage success for broader impact while continuing to build Green Home's core business. The concept of retirement seemed increasingly irrelevant, replaced by ongoing evolution of purpose-driven work that energized rather than depleted me. This transformation in my relationship with work and wealth affected family dynamics in unexpected ways. My brother Mike, who had always been supportive but had followed a conventional corporate path, began questioning his own career trajectory. During a weekend fishing trip, he confessed feeling trapped in his marketing executive role, financially comfortable but spiritually depleted. "I'm making good money pushing products people don't need," he admitted as we sat in the boat, lines cast into still water. "Watching you build something meaningful makes me wonder what I'm doing with my life." It was a vulnerable moment between brothers that highlighted how success could be measured in influence as well as income, how one person's countercultural choices could create permission for others to examine their own paths. I didn't have simple answers for Mike, but I could ask the questions that had guided my own journey. What energizes rather than depletes you? What impact matters to you personally? What would you build if financial security wasn't the primary consideration? Our conversation shifted something for both of us. For Mike, it was the beginning of a career reassessment that would eventually lead him to a leadership role at a purpose-driven company in the renewable energy sector. For me, it reinforced the importance of articulating the deeper motivations behind my choices, not just what I had built, but why it mattered and how it had transformed my understanding of success. 6 years after launching Green Home from my spare bedroom, the company had grown beyond even my ambitious projections. Annual revenue approached $18 million with healthy profit margins and clear growth trajectories across consumer retail, e-commerce, and corporate divisions. The team had expanded to nearly 100 employees across 3 countries, each contributing unique talents to our shared mission. At a personal level, I had achieved the milestone referenced in the skeptical family comments years earlier: financial independence by age 40. The narrative arc seemed complete, from mockery to validation, from risk to reward, from uncertainty to security. Yet the journey felt unfinished, the story still unfolding in directions I couldn't have anticipated. At the outset, true wealth, I discovered, wasn't measured primarily in financial metrics, but in freedom of choice, the ability to allocate time according to purpose rather than necessity, to pursue impact alongside income, to define success by contribution rather than compensation. This realization transformed how I approach both business decisions and personal priorities, focusing energy on meaning creation rather than mere money generation. The family dynamics had evolved accordingly. The skepticism that had greeted my initial departure from corporate security had transformed into genuine respect, not just for the financial outcome, but for the courage to pursue an uncertain path. Thanksgiving conversations no longer featured subtle digs about internet businesses or career stability, but thoughtful discussions about purpose and impact. Even Uncle Frank, the most traditionally minded of the family, had shifted his perspective. He'd recently started mentoring young entrepreneurs at a local business incubator, sharing wisdom while I still have some to offer, as he put it. When I expressed surprise at this development, he acknowledged the influence of witnessing my journey. "You showed me that business success comes in more forms than I'd considered," he admitted. "Figured I should expand my perspective before I get too set in my ways." These relational evolutions were among the most meaningful outcomes of the Green Home journey. The subtle ways in which my unconventional choices had created space for others to reconsider their own paths and priorities. The impact extended beyond financial metrics or market share to shifts in consciousness within my immediate circle and beyond. As my 40th birthday approached, the arbitrary milestone I'd once set for financial independence, I found myself reflecting on the multidimensional transformation of the past 6 years. The external achievements were substantial and satisfying. A thriving company, financial security, industry recognition. But the internal shifts were equally significant. Greater self-trust, clearer purpose alignment, deeper understanding of what constituted meaningful success. A week before that milestone birthday, Westfield's leadership requested a meeting to discuss the partnership and potential next steps. Their initial investment had appreciated significantly as Green Home had grown. They were understandably interested in strategies to maximize return on that investment. The timing seemed significant, a potential inflection point coinciding with the achievement of personal financial goals. The meeting took place in our Chicago headquarters rather than their corporate offices, a subtle indicator of how the relationship had evolved from their initial position of greater leverage. James and I represented Green Home, with Marta joining. For specific operational discussions, Diane Mercer led the Westfield team, accompanied by their CFO and head of strategic partnerships. "We've been extremely pleased with Green Home's growth since our investment," Diane began. "The numbers speak for themselves. As we look ahead, we see several potential paths forward." She outlined 3 scenarios. First, maintaining the current partnership structure with continued collaborative growth. Second, Westfield increasing their ownership stake through additional investment. Third, a complete acquisition that would integrate Green Home into Westfield's broader portfolio while maintaining brand distinctiveness. The presentation was thoughtful and data-driven, highlighting synergies achieved thus far and potential advantages of deeper integration. The financial projections were compelling, particularly for the acquisition scenario. Numbers that would represent life-changing liquidity for me and significant returns for our earlier investors. "We're not looking for an immediate answer," Diane concluded. "These are complex decisions with both business and personal implications. We wanted to open the conversation and give you time to consider options." I thanked her for the comprehensive presentation and promised thoughtful consideration of all scenarios. "Green Home's mission remains our North Star," I added. "Any evolution in our partnership needs to advance rather than compromise that mission." The meeting concluded cordially, with agreement to reconvene in 3 weeks after internal discussions. James, Marta, and I remained in the conference room afterward, processing the implications of Westfield's proposals. "The acquisition offer would be substantial," James noted, always pragmatic about financial realities. "But integration always involves compromise, regardless of promises about autonomy." Marta nodded agreement. "We've built something special here, not just products or revenue, but culture. Team members who believe in the mission, systems aligned with values. That's harder to preserve inside a larger corporate structure." Their insights reflected concerns already forming in my own mind. The Westfield partnership had been positive precisely because it had maintained Green Home's independence while providing resources for accelerated growth. Full acquisition would shift decision-making authority and inevitably reshape company culture, regardless of intentions, to preserve brand integrity. "What would you do?" I asked them both. "If this was solely your decision?" "Stay independent," Marta replied without hesitation. "We're just hitting our stride. The B Corp certification is nearly complete. The international expansion is gaining momentum. There's so much runway ahead." James was more measured. "It depends on your personal goals. If maximizing financial return is the priority, the acquisition makes sense. If continuing to build something distinctive matters more, independence preserves that opportunity." His framing clarified the essential question: what did I truly want at this juncture? With financial independence already achieved, decisions could be based on purpose and impact rather than economic necessity. The core consideration wasn't whether Westfield's offer was financially attractive, it certainly was, but whether it aligned with deeper motivations for building Green Home in the first place. I spent the following week in focused reflection, seeking clarity about both personal priorities and company direction. Conversations with trusted advisors, long walks along Lake Michigan, quiet evenings reviewing the journey from spare-bedroom startup to multi-million-dollar enterprise. The process wasn't about calculating financial outcomes, but discerning purpose alignment across potential paths. What emerged was deep certainty about Green Home's next chapter: continued independence, accelerated mission focus, expanded impact across markets and product categories. The company had proven its model and vision. The opportunity now was to extend that vision with the freedom that independence allowed. 3 weeks after their initial presentation, I met with the Westfield team to deliver our response. With James and Marta beside me, I expressed appreciation for the partnership thus far and for the thoughtful proposal regarding potential next steps. After careful consideration, we believe Green Home can best fulfill its mission by maintaining our current relationship structure rather than pursuing deeper integration or acquisition, I explained. The partnership has benefited both organizations tremendously. We see substantial growth opportunity ahead while preserving the distinctive approaches that make each company successful. Diane received the decision with professional grace, though her disappointment was evident. "We respect your perspective," she responded. "The partnership has indeed been valuable for both sides. We'll continue supporting Green Home's growth within the current framework." The conversation shifted to specific initiatives for the coming year. Expanded retail distribution, new product categories, enhanced sustainability metrics across operations. The meeting concluded positively despite the declined acquisition offer, with mutual commitment to partnership objectives and collaborative growth. Afterward, walking back through Green Home's office spaces, past design teams collaborating on new product concepts, marketing staff planning campaign elements, customer service representatives resolving inquiries with genuine care, I felt profound certainty about the decision. This wasn't just a business to be bought and sold. It was a living organism with purpose beyond profit, creating value that transcended transaction. My 40th birthday arrived the following week with less fanfare than symbolic significance. The milestone I'd casually referenced years earlier, financial independence by 40, had been achieved ahead of schedule. But the journey had transformed the meaning of that achievement, revealing it as a milestone rather than a destination, a foundation for impact rather than conclusion of effort. The family celebration embodied this evolution in understanding. Gathered at my brother Mike's home, the conversation reflected how far we'd all come from the skepticism that had greeted my departure from corporate security. My father raised a toast that captured the transformation. To Nathan, who taught us all that security comes in more forms than a steady paycheck, and success in more forms than a traditional career. Uncle Frank added his own acknowledgement. "When you left Meridian, I thought you were making a classic young man's mistake, trading certainty for possibility. Turns out possibility had more upside than any of us imagined. Well played, nephew." These words meant more than any financial metric or business achievement. Recognition not just of external success, but of the courage to follow unconventional wisdom, to trust internal guidance over external expectations. The family that had once mocked my decision now celebrated not just the outcome, but the process, the willingness to risk temporary discomfort for meaningful creation. Later that evening, as guests departed and family lingered over coffee and dessert, my mother pulled me aside. "I worried so much when you left that secure job," she confessed. "I thought you were throwing away everything you'd worked for." "I know, Mom, you were looking out for me. But what I didn't understand then, what I see so clearly now, is that you weren't running away from something. You were running toward something more important." She squeezed my hand. "I'm not just proud of what you've accomplished. I'm proud of who you've become through building it." Her words captured the most significant dimension of the 6-year journey. Not the business built or wealth accumulated, but the personal transformation through confronting uncertainty, creating value, and aligning purpose with action. The 40-year-old celebrating this milestone was fundamentally different from the 33-year-old who had walked away from corporate security with nothing but conviction and courage. That transformation represented the true return on investment, not measured in dollars, but in depth, not calculated in spreadsheets, but experienced in the quiet certainty of chosen purpose. Financial independence by 40 had been achieved, but its meaning had evolved from escape and leisure to expanded impact and intentional creation. The skeptics had fallen silent, not because they'd been proven wrong about financial outcomes, but because they'd come to recognize that the metrics they'd been measuring, stability, security, conventional success, were insufficient frameworks for evaluating a life well lived. The mockery had given way to genuine curiosity about different paths to meaning and fulfillment. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the distance traveled from that Thanksgiving dinner where my career change had been publicly questioned. The journey hadn't been linear or predictable. It had involved failures reframed as education, setbacks that prompted innovation, doubts overcome through persistence. Financial independence at 40 wasn't the conclusion I'd once imagined, but rather an inflection point in ongoing evolution. The question wasn't what to retire from, but what to advance toward. How to channel resources, influence and experience toward increasingly meaningful impact. The answer wouldn't come all at once, but would emerge through the same process that had built Greenhome: observation of genuine needs, creative response to identified problems, methodical building of solutions aligned with core values. The canvas had expanded, but the fundamental approach remained consistent, creating value at the intersection of purpose and possibility. The family's silence about my unconventional path had indeed been achieved, replaced by genuine respect and occasional requests for guidance. But that external validation, once so desperately desired, now seemed like a secondary outcome rather than primary motivation, acknowledgement of a journey valuable for its own sake, rather than for the approval it eventually garnered. The true achievement wasn't retiring at 40, but redefining success entirely, creating wealth measured in freedom and impact, rather than merely money and status. That redefinition represented the most meaningful outcome of the path begun 6 years earlier, when mockery had been met with quiet determination to build something authentic and valuable regardless of external opinion. The journey continued, richer for lessons learned and possibilities revealed, guided by purpose that had crystallized through action rather than theorization. Financial independence had been achieved, but the more profound freedom lay in choosing meaningful creation over either conventional security or mere leisure, building not just a business, but a life defined by intentional impact and aligned purpose. 1 year after my 40th birthday, I found myself standing at a podium in front of 300 people at the Sustainable Business Leadership Conference in San Francisco. Greenhome Essentials had been named Eco-Innovation Company of the Year, an honor that reflected the collective efforts of our now 120-person team spanning 4 countries. As I looked out at the audience of industry peers, investors, and sustainability advocates, the journey from ridiculed corporate dropout to recognized industry leader felt surreal. 7 years ago, I was sitting at a Thanksgiving table being told I was throwing away my future. I began, sharing the story that had become something of an origin myth for our company. Today, Greenhome products have helped over 2 million households reduce plastic waste while building a business that proves sustainability and profitability can coexist. The applause was gratifying, but what meant more was the message waiting on my phone after the speech. A simple text from my father. Saw the live stream. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder. You saw something we couldn't see. Glad you trusted yourself. This simple acknowledgement from the person whose disappointment I had once feared most represented a full-circle moment more meaningful than any industry award or financial milestone. The journey hadn't been about proving my family wrong. It had been about building something authentic, regardless of external validation. Yet that validation, freely given rather than desperately sought, carried a sweetness I hadn't anticipated. The week after the conference, I implemented a decision that had been forming in my mind for months. Greenhome had achieved stability, and scalability under James's operational leadership. Our executive team functioned cohesively with clear roles and effective collaboration. The mission and values were deeply embedded in company culture, informing decisions at every level, from product development to hiring practices. The business no longer required my daily involvement to thrive. This realization was simultaneously liberating and disorienting. The company I had built from nothing could now continue its growth trajectory without my constant presence. After careful consideration and discussions with key stakeholders, I announced a shift in my role to the board and executive team. I would remain executive chairman, focusing on strategic vision and industry leadership, but would reduce my active involvement to 3 days per week. The remaining time would be dedicated to my foundation work, angel investing in eco-startups, and mentoring young entrepreneurs building purpose-driven businesses. This isn't retirement, I explained during the announcement. It's evolution. Green Home's success has created opportunity to expand our impact beyond one company. This structure allows me to advance our mission through multiple channels, while the core business continues growing under your capable leadership. The transition was implemented gradually over 3 months, with clear communication about changing responsibilities and decision authorities. James stepped fully into the CEO role he had essentially been filling already, with my explicit endorsement and the board's unanimous support. The company continued its upward trajectory without disruption, validating both the soundness of our leadership structure and the timing of my partial step back. This new rhythm, 3 days focused on Green Home, 4 days dedicated to broader impact initiatives, created space for reflection and integration that the all-consuming startup journey hadn't allowed. For the first time in 7 years, I had bandwidth to process the transformation that had occurred not just in my career, but in my fundamental relationship with work, purpose, and success. The financial independence I had achieved wasn't just about numbers in investment accounts, though those were certainly substantial. It represented freedom to allocate time according to meaning rather than necessity, to pursue impact without the constraints of immediate income requirements. This was a privilege I didn't take lightly, recognizing both the responsibility it entailed and the opportunity it presented. Through my foundation, I focused on 2 interrelated missions: environmental education in underserved schools and support for eco-entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. The connection was intentional. Today's environmentally conscious students would become tomorrow's sustainability innovators, particularly when given tools and mentorship to translate awareness into action. We developed a curriculum that integrated environmental principles with entrepreneurial thinking, teaching students not just about ecological challenges, but how to develop solutions through creative problem-solving and ethical business models. The program was piloted in 30 Chicago schools, with plans for national expansion based on outcome measurements and community feedback. Parallel to this educational initiative, the Foundation established an incubator program for early-stage entrepreneurs working on sustainability solutions. Beyond financial support, we provided mentorship, network connections, and operational guidance, addressing the barriers that often prevented promising innovations from reaching market viability. My angel investing followed similar principles, but with more developed businesses ready for significant scaling. I focused on companies with measurable environmental impact, ethical supply chains, and leadership committed to purpose alongside profit. Rather than maximizing financial returns alone, these investments sought blended value, positive outcomes across economic, social, and environmental dimensions. This portfolio approach to impact, operating through multiple channels with Complementary strategies created a fulfillment that transcended what even Greenhome's success had provided. I was no longer building a single solution, but fostering an ecosystem of change, leveraging resources and experience to amplify innovations. Beyond what I could create personally, the mentorship aspect proved unexpectedly rewarding. Working with young entrepreneurs, particularly those from backgrounds underrepresented in business leadership, reconnected me with the energy and idealism that had launched my own journey. There, fresh perspectives challenged my assumptions. Their determination through obstacles reminded me of early struggles I'd sometimes glossed over in retrospect. One mentee in particular, Amara Johnson, embodied this reciprocal value. A brilliant chemical engineer who had developed biodegradable alternatives to microplastics, she combined technical expertise with passionate advocacy, but struggled with the business aspects of bringing her innovation to market. Our weekly strategy sessions evolved into a genuine friendship as her company progressed from concept to funded startup with manufacturing partnerships. "You know what made your guidance different?" she told me after securing her first major contract. "Most mentors told me to focus exclusively on either profit or impact. You showed me how to integrate both without compromise." Her observation highlighted a core principle I'd discovered through building Greenhome, the false dichotomy between purpose and prosperity that pervaded both business education and popular thinking. The most sustainable enterprises created value across multiple dimensions: financial, social, environmental, not by sacrificing one for others, but by designing models where these elements reinforced rather than competed with each other. This integration became central to both my public speaking and private mentoring. At industry conferences, university classrooms, and corporate retreats, I shared the Greenhome journey not as a prescription for others to follow, but as evidence that alternative paths existed for those willing to challenge conventional wisdom about success and security. The family dynamics that had once featured skepticism and concern evolved into something I couldn't have anticipated. Relatives seeking my perspective on their own career decisions and life choices. My cousin Jeremy consulted me about leaving his law practice to pursue sustainable architecture, a passion he'd subordinated to practical considerations for years. My niece Madison requested guidance on incorporating environmental principles into her marketing studies, seeing opportunities her professors hadn't recognized. Even Uncle Frank, approaching retirement from his traditional corporate career, sought my input on meaningful engagement beyond the golf course. "You figured out something important about purpose that I missed focusing exclusively on financial success," he acknowledged during a long conversation about legacy and contribution. "I'd like to understand it better while I still have time to apply it." These conversations revealed how dramatically perspectives had shifted since that Thanksgiving dinner 7 years earlier. The mockery and concern that had greeted my decision to leave corporate security had transformed into genuine curiosity about alternative definitions of success. My journey had created permission for others to question conventional wisdom about career paths and life priorities. This extended beyond family to former colleagues and connections from my consulting days. Several reached out over the years, initially to congratulate me on Greenhome's visible success, but ultimately to discuss their own dissatisfaction with paths chosen primarily for security and status. Some made significant changes as a result. Others found renewed meaning within existing roles by reframing their approach and priorities. The most meaningful validation came not from external recognition or financial outcomes, but from the alignment between daily activities and core values, the integration I had sought and finally achieved between work and purpose, between prosperity and impact, between personal fulfillment and broader contribution, represented true success beyond Conventional metrics. 7 years after leaving Meridian Consulting, I had built not just a multi-million-dollar company, but a life organized around meaning rather than merely money. Financial independence at 40 hadn't become an endpoint, but a foundation for expanded impact, freedom to allocate resources and attention according to purpose rather than necessity. The journey had transformed not just external circumstances, but internal orientation, from seeking validation to providing value, from fearing uncertainty to embracing possibility, from measuring worth through comparison to defining it through contribution. This evolution continued beyond any particular milestone or achievement, an ongoing process of alignment and integration. During a rare gathering of the entire extended family for my parents' 50th anniversary, my mother pulled me aside during the celebration. "Remember when you first told us you were leaving Meridian to start that internet business?" she asked, linking her arm through mine as we watched relatives mingling across the rented venue. "How could I forget? Dad nearly choked on his turkey." She laughed softly. "We were so worried. Thought you were making a terrible mistake that would take years to recover from." She paused, studying my face with the insight only mothers seem to possess. "But you weren't just being stubborn or rebellious. You saw possibilities we couldn't imagine." "I wasn't certain it would work," I admitted. "I just knew I had to try." "That's the courage I've tried to explain to your cousin's children when they ask about your story," she continued. "It wasn't about the business idea itself. It was about trusting yourself enough to take that leap." Her perspective captured something essential about the journey, that beyond the specific venture or financial outcome, the fundamental act had been trusting internal guidance over external consensus. The willingness to risk temporary discomfort for authentic alignment had made all subsequent achievements possible. As I looked around at family members engaged in animated conversations, I realized how many had been influenced by the alternative path I'd chosen. Younger relatives considering entrepreneurial ventures, mid-career cousins reevaluating priorities, even the generation above mine questioning assumptions about work and retirement. The mockery that had once stung had been replaced by genuine respect, not just for the outcome, but for the courage required by the process. The family that had once defined success through conventional metrics now recognized multiple paths to meaning and fulfillment. My journey had expanded the collective imagination about what was possible when purpose guided decisions more strongly than fear. Financial independence at 40 had been achieved, but its meaning had transformed along the way, from escape and leisure to expanded impact and creation. The freedom it provided wasn't freedom from engagement, but freedom for deeper contribution. The ability to allocate time and resources according to meaning rather than merely monetary return. The true wealth accumulated over 7 years wasn't primarily financial, though that dimension provided important flexibility and opportunity. It was the wealth of aligned purpose, of meaningful creation, of positive impact beyond personal benefit. It was the richness of building something authentic, regardless of external validation, and discovering that the process itself yielded the deepest fulfillment. The family's silence about my unconventional choice had indeed been secured, replaced by curious questions and occasional requests for guidance. But that external shift, while gratifying, was secondary to the internal transformation that had occurred through facing uncertainty, creating value, and defining success according to personal truth rather than conventional wisdom. Looking toward the future, beyond financial milestones or business achievements, the path continued unfolding with purpose as its compass. Not retirement by traditional definition, but ongoing evolution guided by the question that had launched the journey 7 years earlier. What world do I want to help create, and what unique contribution can I make toward that vision? The answer would continue emerging through action rather than abstract theory, through creation rather than mere calculation, through aligned purpose rather than external expectation. The journey that had begun with family mockery and culminated in financial independence at 40 was neither ending nor circular, but spiraled, returning to similar questions at higher levels of integration and impact. The silence of the skeptics had been earned not through argument but through demonstration, living proof that courage could convert possibility into reality when aligned with authentic purpose and sustained through inevitable challenges. That demonstration continued beyond any particular milestone, an ongoing testament to the wisdom of building your own path. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.